As much as I enjoy a good villain, I feel like this guy right here is written to be like a bad one. And I don't say that because he has bad motivations or anything like that. I just feel like his villainy comes from a point of petty jealousy rather than a point of actual characterization. And for that, I think I'll have to put the blame on the writers, even though I feel like they did much better job with his character in the show than Gurm did in the books. And I feel like bit of unrelated tangent here. The only reason why Gurm had to write this guy's character is because he made the mistake of mentioning him in when Jaime talks about him in the Book of the Kingsguard or whatever. Point is, the show did a much better job at showing Criston Cole. All right, and look at him. He's beautiful. Look at that one. And then look here. Look at him. He's angry. And look, here's the one with Joffrey. Whatever. The point is that in the books, Criston Cole doesn't have a lot of characterization, but his most forthcoming traits are his skills as a fighter, as a commander, and his hatred for Rhaenyra. Same, bro. He's just like me. He's not. He's a 2D character with no depth. He's very shallow, and I feel like, as I mentioned, he was written because Gurm had to write him, not because Gurm thought of him while writing, House of the Dragon, or Dance of the Dragons, whatever it is. In the show, I felt like they had a chance to make him a lot more understandable. Now, of course, Criston Cole is a villain, so I wouldn't want him to be likable as a good person is likable, but you could like him as a villain. But they failed to make that happen. They made a complete ass of the strategy, and they made him do dumb things, and made him say stupid things, and all in all, I think they missed the mark where they had to hit it, alright? Before I get into what I have problems with Criston, I feel like as an audience we need to cut this man some slack, because you and I, at least as the viewers, would more likely be the peasantry than would be the nobility. Even if we are the middle class, we would still not be considered high-born, alright? And that is why I feel like this man's meteoric rise to power, especially in the Green Council, is something that we should be able to look at with at least some form of respect. This man right here is among the few who had to work for his position. He had to be the best at something, and that is why he became so politically involved. And then, of course, it's also because Rhaenyra found him attractive. But who wouldn't? I mean, come on, look at him. He's handsome as shit. He's better looking than I am. The point is that Criston Cole does not have a banner, he has no heraldry, and he has no squire. He is all alone in a world where people eat each other for their ambitions, and I feel like that much we have to commend of his character. Now here's a breakdown of my problems with the way he's written. The first crime is obviously by having him beat Daemon in a dumbass way in the duel. Now I know that is a nitpick, but I am petty as shit, and so I will point it out because that's all he's got, man. That's like taking Caraxes away from Daemon. What does he have left? Alright, what, Dark Sister? Nobody gives a shit about Dark Sister, alright? Maybe somebody does, I don't know. Well, the point is, alright, the optics of this scene, second point, the optics of that scene are super weird, because even though the power dynamics are blatantly obvious, he is stuck between a rock and a hard one. Alright, now if he says no, then Rhaenyra, maybe in her anger, would say that maybe he did try to do something to her, in which case he faces execution. If he does submit to her desire, then he feels like his honor, duty, and dignity has been stripped from him, and now he's looked at as a tool, not in the context that he wants to be looked at as a tool, but rather than in a more perverted context. He's now as a tool for her to use as she wishes, even if it is dishonorable to him. That is the major problem. It's not the fact that he's an ex-boyfriend who didn't get to be with the princess, because he could have done that. The problem is that he has a problem with his honor being taken away from him, and that is the driver of the main conflict. Now, a point that the showrunners missed is that Cole should be a man driven by honor and duty. In some regards, his motivations are very similar to Ned. He is chivalrous and honorable and dutiful, right? That is what makes him celibate, and his duty to Rhaenyra also makes him do bad things. But however, Rhaenyra makes him break the oath that he has sworn. Now his honor is stained, but he did so while doing his duty. Rhaenyra is to blame for this, but Cole still cares about his honor. Alright? To gain his honor back, he tries to convince Rhaenyra to marry him. Now, if he marries her, he doesn't have to live as a hollow man who forsaked his honor for something, as petty or as mild as what happened. So, of course, she says no, because who the hell would say yes to that idiotic proposition? But this is where it goes downhill. Now, The scene on the boat is very interesting to me, because on the one hand, I feel like he should never have asked her, because I feel like his character would have been much better if he had neglected her, and she proposed that they keep doing that, which makes him think that she doesn't think of him as anything more than what he did to her that night. But he does approach her, and I feel like there is still a lot of characterization there, so let's talk about it, shall we? Now, on the boat, Rhaenyra whinges repeatedly about her duties to Christie, and literally runs from them, alright? It's because nobody ever held my position, where in episode 3, she, reminds Cole that she is so outwardly privileged compared to like 99% of the population, and then she coerces him, despite his verbal refusal and immediate what's the word here that I'm looking for? Unwillingness to participate, despite Rhaenyra locking him in and kissing him twice, and then doing everything herself. Only then to throw the same duties she ignored and complained about it right in Criston's face. I may chafe at my duties, she says in episode 5. That is the moment she ruins him and pushes him to break his vows for nothing but her immediate gratification. Not even a real relationship. She wants to keep him as a side piece. Right? You see the issue here? Right? To a man like Cole, honor means a lot. And the honorable thing in his mind is a fairy tale story of where he saves himself by saving the princess. But she would rather keep him, on the DL. That's the major problem. Rhaenyra wants to turn him into a side piece, a fling on the string, if you will, at the absolute expense of his oaths, his honor, and risking him being gelded, tortured, and executed, and out of utter last resort, that's what he does, he desperately tries to propose a silly offer to escape, and that is what people focus on him to vilify. Alright? Rhaenyra had a massive hand in selfishly ruining Cole just to get herself off. Now, of course, after being spitefully used by Daemon, that much is, fairly understandable, and Cole turning against her is one of the biggest examples of her own immaturity and self-centeredness backfiring in her own face. A lot of Rhaenyra's own problems are her own creations. Criston hates her because she made him do bad things. The realm doesn't like her because she's just a bad politician. Legally speaking, she makes more graves for herself than she has family members, and then she has to fill them one by one with them. Now, that's not the point here. Now, I feel like if the show made a bigger point about Cole and his honor, then his reaction would make sense. A line about how this was all I had, and now it means nothing. Alright? While referring to his white cloak, obviously, because that's what that matters. Or somewhere in the past, a line, where he says out loud to Rhaenyra what honor means to him. When they were hunting in the forest, maybe you could have had an off line saying honor is what makes me who I am, or something. You get the point. As a man who had to climb the social order with nothing but his skill, honor compels Criston Cole to act in certain ways. Now, instead of giving us a man burdened by his own guilt, we get a character that seems to be motivated by two things: his hatred for Rhaenyra and his servitude to Alicent, which also just seems to be an echo chamber because she doesn't like Rhaenyra either. Maybe she does. I don't know what the hell is going on with Alicent. Now, of course, instead of doing that, the writers turned him into a murderer for no reason whatsoever. Alright? He kills Joffrey at the wedding. Can you see Joffrey? He's right here. Alright. He kills Joffrey at the wedding, which I feel like is an exaggeration. Even though in the books, Joffrey dies at his hands in a duel, and I don't even think this line happens in the books, alright? It's the kind of villainy that I don't like. They made him into a psychotic lunatic who would break his fuse at any given moment simply because somebody suggested something to him, which they think he's completely fine with. In Joffrey's mind, Criston doesn't care about honor and stuff like that, and that's just the way that the Highborn think. It gives you a mindset into their views. Joffrey Lonmouth doesn't think Criston Cole cares about his oath. Alright? That may be because he comes from a position of privilege where breaking oaths isn't that big of a deal. To this man it is. That is why he breaks. Shouldn't have killed him, though. I'd also like to point out the fact that this is the exact same goddamn episode in which Daemon Targaryen bashes his wife's skull in with a rock, and he gets to be the bad guy. Are you people delusional? I'm not even going to bother with that. Alright. So instead of going as the honor route and the guilt route, he's just shown as an ex-boyfriend who didn't get to marry the princess and stays angry for the rest of the entire show, which is a waste of time in my opinion. He behaves in petty mannerisms against Rhaenyra by calling her the C word, alright? And then he treats her children like shit. Though in my opinion that is quite justifiable, because think about it this way, right? Rhaenyra's kids are being trained to become enemies of Alicent's kids. Even though that's not their will, that is going to happen because of the way the dance is set up. This means that they're being taught to wield their swords against the children he's meant to protect. In hindsight, he might have to kill them in the future, and that is why he's better off not being attached and ensuring that they're bad at what they do. That's the way that I'm justifying his justification for being an asshole. Alright? And also, the whole Beesbury situation is useless, because in the books, he kills Beesbury because he feels like it's needed in order to progress their goal. In the show, he just does it because, he's too strong. What the shit, dude? If you're going to write Criston Cole to either be violent and angry all the time, can you at least go through with it and make him? Because right now he's just a half-flaccid dude who can't figure out if he's hard or soft. I can't figure that out either, alright? Now, if you're going to make him into a villain, then have him cut his throat and throw him out the window. That's the kind of villainy I can get behind. That's the kind of shit that's fun to watch. Let me get back to the point. Now, Cole suffers a lot from being retconned in a bad way. His ideals don't exist, and I feel like him being a tool rather than a driver will eventually leave him as being one of the bigger what-ifs of the show. What if Criston Cole was a better character? Alright, now if the writers went to, the certain character type that I envisioned for Criston, things might be a bit more interesting. And I haven't this memorized, so you're going to have to watch me watch this while I try to read it. Okay. Currently speaking, Criston Cole is, where was I? Currently speaking, he's just a spurned lover archetype. The audience hasn't come to grips with the fact that it's not his lack of Rhaenyra which is pissing him off, it's his lack of honor, and how he can't salvage it. Look at it this way. Criston, in his eyes, has done something unthinkable, and an act of dishonor which makes him feel deeply ashamed of what he has done. He came from nothing and suddenly landed himself in honor and prestige. His perception of the position is more extreme due to viewing tales of chivalry and honor uncritically and unquestionably, sort of like how children look at it, or how Sansa looked at it in the original part of this in the story. Mostly because he never lived in that world until Rhaenyra plucked him out of it. Alright, when he, in his view, tries to save what honor he can, Rhaenyra reveals herself to see the act of dishonor as frivolous, something that caused him such shame, she just casually suggests that they can keep doing again and again, without willing any way to save whatever honor that he has left. After he is denied a death that would save whatever honor that he thinks he has left, the virtuous queen saves him at his lowest point. And in his view, she is now who he must serve faithfully. And I really hope they don't go into that romantic angle, but I'm already scared about it, because they mentioned a line about how you feel for me. I'll put up the still if I can find it, right? Instead of that, I want his motivation to be a zealous one, wrapped in a sense of loyalty and honor. Someone true and moral he can give his loyalties to, and use his service to further all that is good and proper. Perhaps that is what he wished to have with Rhaenyra before she, coerced him. Meanwhile, the girl he had given up his honor for does not only feel ashamed about what she did to him, she continued doing what she had done for 10 more years, and is able to flaunt her privilege and the evidence of her privilege without any consequences, while he desperately tries to redeem himself of that lapse of judgment of that night, something his queen showed him mercy for, earning her eternal loyalty. Now, I'm not saying that Criston Cole is right in what he does, alright? But this could be a compelling thing, a darker side of chivalry and honor that is blind to its own hypocrisy, but not without some eternal logic to it. It's not a lapse in judgment. You can see where he's coming from. It can be hideous, but that is the kind of zealotry that is also something some knights aspire to be. There's a purity in it that's almost romantic if you halfway believe in the chivalric tales and that knightly nonsense, right? If you go with the route that I described, then his actions and death are much more gratified. Criston has lived his life as a man who is so blinded by honor that he forgets to act like it. He kills Beesbury, despite him being totally valid in his criticisms. He supports Aegon because of his obsession with his own honor, and doesn't even care twice to think that the kid he has crowned is just as self-indulgent and dishonorable as Rhaenyra's, right? He spends his life fighting for the kid, only to die without even a single dragon at his side. In his final moments, Criston Cole comes to terms with the fact that he has led a dishonorable life. Rather, he has led a shrill one, shrouded within the guise of honor. When he sees men fighting for Rhaenyra, and after Rhaenyra is killed for Aegon, the third that is, They are fighting for the oaths they kept. It should remind him of himself, once when he was a decent man and not a hollow man, and ideals that he would rather protect than act upon. Alright, where was I? When he sees these men willing to fight for a woman they've never seen or never will see, he sees truly what honor means to those men he's fighting. Alright? In his final moments, he demands a trial by combat to save his men's lives. And this is his sort of redemption. Sort of like how Daemon's redemption comes from his killing of Aemond, Criston's can come when he finally realizes that his duty as the last standing knight is to die, hoping that his men's lives can be saved. He spent his entire life trying to protect his white cloak, not knowing that he's bloodied it many times over. A darker side of chivalry that led Criston's meteoric rise in status, but then eventually saw his downfall. That is what I feel like his arc could be, and it could be a very interesting one. A knight who forgot his duties in favor of his sense of honor. Boom. Mic drop. Now, Cole's story could have been about a man who had high values, knightly virtues, that were different from the people of high nobility, such as Joffrey Lonmouth, for example. As a commoner, he held on to those beliefs for his dear life because he thinks that's what got him there. To realize that his honor means nothing to the woman who gave him his post would be a wake-up call. He feels massive guilt for what he has done, and his pathetic attempt at trying to salvage what he thinks honor is gives him a slap in the face. It could then lead to a story of a man who feels compelled to serve the queen who gave him somewhat of a liberation. He then spends the rest of life in a state of self-loathing, clutching at what he thinks gives him his honor back, and in the end, he finds himself outmatched by men who are also pursuing honor, just like he was in his entire life. The story about a man who has no noble blood, makes his way to the top, gets used and dishonored, then doesn't get or understand what his honor really is. Instead of that, we have a brash loser who can't get over the fact that a princess wouldn't run away with him. I think wasted potential. What do you think? Now, I'm just going to say this out loud. Cole is despised in the audience, and I feel like he should be a villain that we should like to hate. He should be an enjoyable villain who has real motivations, but he does bad things because he feels like he's doing the right thing. It's a twisted sense of good versus evil. He thinks what he's doing is correct. He feels like Aegon should be king because he just idolizes Aegon as a virtuous person, even though he knows he is a piece of garbage. That way, I feel like in the end, when it all comes to bite him back in the ass, he can realize that the man he fought for is not the man he wished he was. And that is where I think I'll be leaving it.